We get taught so little about our cars here in the UK that a lot of people, in fact many of us, are driving around in cars that are in a genuinely dangerous state. This video is for everyone, especially those who don't necessarily know all that much about their cars, and if you know anyone who fits that bill or who you just think should know a little bit more, then feel free to share this video with them. This is 5 things that everyone should know about their car. Number 1, under-inflated tyres. According to TyreSafe, 56.8% of cars on the UK's roads have under-inflated tyres. They say that accounts for £1 billion of money wasted on extra fuel every year, which is insane, and they say that anywhere between down to 20% lower than the recommended pressure would be considered dangerous, and 40% lower than the recommended pressure would be considered very dangerous. Low pressure means less grip, and less grip means your car has less ability to make turns, to stop, or to accelerate, or to just be able to, well, grip, especially in wet or cold conditions. I made a full video explaining exactly how to check your tire pressures, how to find what pressures are right for your car, and how to inflate them as well, so do check that video out after this one. But in short, you should check them regularly, like once a month and before long journeys, and you can use either a pressure gauge that you can keep in your car. I'll leave a link to one in the description you can check out, or you can just use your local petrol station's inflator to check both the pressure and to top them up there and then. Number 2, oil and fluids. I've also done a video on both how to check for oil leaks and how to check your oil level, so again, do check both of those out if you haven't already, but it's a good idea to check your oil level on a regular basis, much like your tyres. In fact, it could be a good idea to check them all at the same time, just do it as a single 5-minute job once a month, and to do that, you'll need to open your bonnet, which there's normally a latch in either the driver or passenger's footwell, then a secondary latch that's normally on the bonnet itself, often in the middle. Then you can pull your dipstick out, wipe it clean, put it back in all the way down, then pull it back out again, and look at how far the level is up on the dipstick, ideally nicely between the minimum and maximum lines, verging on closer to maximum. If it's at, near, or even below the low mark, then you should definitely top up your oil. If it's near to or at or even slightly above the maximum line, then you should leave it be, as having too much oil can also be a problem. When it comes to topping up, you shouldn't just use any old oil you can find on the shelf. Your car uses a specific type, so either head to your local garage to get you a hand in an expert advice, or use either the owner's manual if it lists it in there, or even just one of the car parts websites like Halfords or Euro Car Parts, as they can generally give you a good recommendation for what will at least mostly work with your car. When physically pouring the oil in, first of all, make sure you pour it into the oil fill cap, obviously with the cap removed, rather than trying to, say, fit it into the dipstick tube, as I have heard stories of that happening. And also, it's a good idea to only pour 100 milliliters or so at a time in sort of small chunks, and recheck the level after you've poured it in, rather than just dumping a whole bottle in and hoping that that's fine. If you do notice that your oil level is low and in need of topping up, then it's a good idea to check under your car and in your engine bay for any signs of any major leaks, as of course it doesn't matter how much oil you put in if it's all gonna just fall back out again, so worth checking. Also, it's worth noting that you generally don't need to top up your oil more than once or twice over the course of a year. Some engines do have problems, and some models do have problems with oil consumption, and so you might be topping up a little more, say, frequently and little bits at a time, but in general, you still shouldn't be pouring all that much extra in, and so anything more than, say, 500 milliliters of top-ups, especially regularly, would indicate to me that there's a problem that needs addressing. Your coolant is often a coloured fluid, either a sort of green or a sort of pink or purple, and it's often in a clear container so you can see the level through the side. Ideally, again, it's going to be somewhere between that minimum and maximum line. Of course, if it is towards the lower end or below the minimum line, then you will want to top up, although it is specific, the type of coolant is specific to your car. So again, it's a good idea to check either your manual, your local garage, or parts stores to make sure you get the right coolant to add in. Most cars on the road have a brake fluid level sensor, which will warn you if the fluid level gets too low. Of course, you can still visually inspect it, and it's a good way to check the quality or the condition of that fluid. It should be relatively clear rather than, black or murky. And also, I cannot stress the importance enough that if that warning goes off or your brake fluid level does get below the minimum line, you shouldn't just pour more fluid in and forget about it. It's incredibly important that you find out why that fluid is missing and not just top it up, as having that fluid going missing generally means that either your seals or the brake lines themselves have a leak in them, and that's a very serious problem, as if they do have a leak, then no pressure will be getting to your brakes to stop your car. This normally has a blue, sometimes yellow cap, and requires a 50-50 mix of screen wash and water. You can often buy pre or ready mixed or ready to use fluid if you would rather, although the concentrate is often sort of cheaper in the long run. Also, you just kind of pour it all in until it's pretty much overflowing and you can clip your cap back on. It's best to keep this topped up regularly rather than letting it run all the way out and then topping it back up again, so that you always have at least some to clear any obstructions on your windscreen while you're driving. Power steering fluid is one that you might have and you might want to keep an eye on. Most, or actually a lot of modern cars are coming with electric power steering instead of hydraulic, and so you might not have any power steering fluid, but if you do have it, much like brake lines, it's normally a good idea to work out why the level has gone down rather than just to top it up. Transmission oil is one that you generally don't need to pay that much attention to or keep an eye on, depending on the vehicle anyway, and it's also, I'm mostly mentioning it here so that you just know it exists rather than something that you actively need to keep an eye on. Same goes for differential oil, as again, generally speaking, it's not a maintenance item, and it's also, if you have a front wheel drive car, it's quite likely that your differential oil and your transmission oil are actually the same thing because they're all in the same box. Fuel. Obviously, you need some of that in the car to make it work. It generally runs through filters, which can be part of a service item at certain intervals. And also, if you smell fuel, but around or near your car unexpectedly, then it's best to find the source of that smell and the source of the fuel before you start the engine or try and drive anywhere. Also, if you have a newer diesel car, you might have an extra fluid called AdBlue, which is used for reducing emissions, and I think needs to be topped up fairly regularly. Often it's a second sort of port right next to your fuel filler cap. You'll probably know about it if your car is fitted with that. Number 3, brakes. Your brakes are important, like really, really important, so please check them and make sure that they are in a good, safe operating condition. Have a look while you're checking your tire pressures and check how thick the sort of meat of the pad is. Also, run your finger across the face of the disc to feel for both grooves as you run it up and down, and how thick the lip on the edge of the disc is. If the pad doesn't look like it has all that much actual meat left, or the disc looks like it's getting pretty thin or heavily gouged, then it's time to get them replaced. How to know there's a problem? You might hear a squealing while driving, either when pressing especially gently on the brake pedal or just a constant noise. That generally indicates that your brake pads have worn down and are in need of replacing. You also might feel a vibration while braking, either in the whole car or through the pedal, specifically while braking as well, and that will generally mean that your brake discs are either warped or have bad runouts, and again, generally means that they need to be replaced. Also, if the pedal feels unusually soft, or there's, you're pushing harder on the pedal than you normally have to, you're pushing your foot further to get the same amount of braking force, you feel you have to, press the brakes earlier than you normally would to come to a reasonable stop. Any of those sorts of things generally mean that there is either air in the brake lines, or that you have a leak of your brake fluid somewhere. That is the sort of condition that, once it presents itself, I would not drive that car again until you can resolve that issue. Generally speaking, if it's just air in the lines, then the pedal might be a little bit softer, especially after some use, and that's the sort of thing that you can generally just bleed the brake system and it's all good. But if you're generally having to press harder, firmer, pump the pedal to get any braking action, then that generally means more that there is a problem with your braking system, and that's something you need to get checked, fixed, and repaired as soon as possible. Number 4, lights. For God's sake, people, turn off your fog lights. This is what the icons look like for the front and back. Do not turn these on unless you cannot see 100 meters in front of you due to fog. As for checking your lights, well, that's pretty easy. You just turn them all on, jump out and walk around the car and take a look. You might need a friend to help by pressing the brake pedal and putting the car into reverse to turn those lights on. Or if you park in front of a shop's glass windows and reverse park in, then you can use the glass in the shop to look at your lights and see if they're working while you stay in the car. As for replacing any broken bulbs, well, that's generally pretty easy. It can often even be a completely tool-free experience, but if you would rather, most part shops will happily take a few quid extra to fit them for you. Number 5, what's that noise? Our cars make a lot of noises. Some are harmless and some are signs of major issues. Here's a rough summary. The sorts of harmless noises you can expect are things like rattles from plastics just rattling around, especially in doors or from your dashboard, your AC system, that kind of thing. You might also hear your tires scrubbing, especially when you're at full lock and doing a tight turn. And also a visual thing that you might see is some white sort of smoke or vapor from your exhaust, especially when the car is just starting up or just has only been running for a short period of time, and especially if it's cold and damp outside, you will have some amount of white smoke from your exhaust, but that is just condensation making its way out of your exhaust system. The sorts of noises you should check sooner rather than later include things like sort of squeaking while driving, like those brake pads that I mentioned. Also, things like squeaky belts from your engine. You'll generally hear them, especially when the engine's running, and you can check with lifting your bonnet up. You can often hear squeaking from the front of your engine or wherever your belts are. That can either be the belt or the tensioners, but generally speaking, those are normally the auxiliary belts, so they're not too bad of a condition, but it is often worth getting that checked, well, sooner rather than later. As for the sorts of noises that would indicate you should stop the car like now, well, that's things like knocking or banging, especially when accompanied by vibration, a rough handling or a loss of handling, or any shaking or sounds of impacts, especially onto the body. Things like dragging sounds, if you can hear something dragging under the car, that's worth stopping for. Slapping sounds as you drive, a sort of, well, I suppose, fap type noise, that is often a flat tire and should definitely be stopped and repaired. You can also have things like your engine spluttering or stalling or even just kind of knocking around. Again, you should probably stop the car there and work out what's up. Also, as a visual cue, if you see plumes of white smoke or white sort of, vapor out of the back, out of your exhaust, then again, that is an indication of a coolant leak. It will also smell slightly sweet, and again, you should probably stop the car. Or, again, a visual note, if you see blue smoke out of your exhaust, that means your engine is burning oil, and again, that's something that you should probably stop and make sure that you just have enough oil left in the car. And the sort of things that you would generally want to run from your car because of, well, the first one is visual. If you see smoke or fire, especially from your bonnet, that's kind of a GTFO condition. Also, if you smell smoke, especially large quantities of it from your, say, your AC system, your vents, especially if you can see the smoke and there's no exterior source of it, like you're not driving through a cloud of, someone's bonfire off the side of the road, it's just randomly smelling very toxically like smoke, then again, you should probably stop the car and, well, retreat to safe position. Of course, that's a rough idea anyway, and a very incomplete list as well, but hopefully it just gives you a bit of an idea about what to listen and look out for while you're driving. Hopefully this has been a useful video and a useful list for you. If you have any questions or suggestions, then feel free to leave those in the comments down below. Checking these sorts of things, especially the sort of regular maintenance, things like your tire pressures, your oil and fluid levels, that sort of stuff, is something that takes 5 minutes once a month, but can save you both your wallet in terms of fuel costs, in terms of maintenance and repairs, but also quite literally your life. So I highly recommend you add that into your scheduling. Also, like I said, this video is intended to help everyone and anyone, so if you know anyone who you think should know this sort of stuff, then feel free to share the video with them. Otherwise, that is kind of it from me. If you want to see more videos like this one, more guides and explanations, but also things like car reviews and me repairing my cars and all that sort of stuff, then feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notification icon. Check out more videos on the end cards. And like I said, I'll leave a couple of links to some useful tools and things that you can pick up in the description for you to check out. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you on the next video.